Have you ever noticed how some people keep leaving your life, even when you desperately wanted them to stay? A friendship slowly fades, a relationship ends, someone you thought would always be there suddenly becomes a stranger, and for a while you start wondering, what's wrong with me? But what if every person who walks away isn't a loss? What if some people leave because you're becoming someone they can no longer walk alongside? Because sometimes, walking alone isn't loneliness, it's the space where you finally become yourself. 1. You start outgrowing the people around you. At first, you don't notice it. You still talk, you still laugh, you still make plans. But something feels different. The conversations don't excite you anymore. The things you used to care about don't feel important. And you start wanting a completely different life. This can feel like losing people. But sometimes, it's actually an identity transition. You're changing the way you see yourself. And when your identity changes, the relationships built around your old identity may stop feeling natural. That's why growth can feel lonely. You're not necessarily losing everyone. You're losing the version of yourself that needed those relationships. 2. You get tired of being the only one trying. Maybe you know this pattern. You send the second message. You make the plans. You apologize first. You keep conversations alive when the other person barely responds, and you tell yourself, maybe they're just busy. So you try harder, until one day, you don't. You stop chasing, and suddenly you realize how much effort was holding the relationship together. That's an uncomfortable realization, because sometimes you're not afraid of losing the person, you're afraid to discover that they were already letting you go. But healthy connection shouldn't require one person to constantly prove why they deserve a place in someone's life. 3. You become comfortable being misunderstood. When you start changing, people don't always understand it. You become quieter. You say no more often. You stop joining every plan. You start caring about different things. And someone says, "You've changed." Maybe they're right, but changing doesn't automatically mean you've become worse. Sometimes it means you finally become honest. The problem is, people often feel safest with the version of you they already understand. So when you grow beyond that version, they may resist it. And eventually you learn, not everyone needs to understand your journey for it to be valid. 4. Your peace becomes more important than your place in the group. There comes a point when being included isn't enough. You can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. You can laugh with everyone and go home emotionally exhausted. So you start asking different questions. Not, do they like me? But who do I become when I'm around them? Do you feel safe? Can you disagree? Can you be honest? Do you feel like yourself? Because sometimes the loneliest place isn't being alone. It's being somewhere you constantly have to edit yourself to belong. 5. Your growth starts changing your environment. Imagine you've decided to change your life. You're becoming more disciplined. You're taking your goals seriously. You're trying to break old habits. But every time you move forward, someone pulls you toward the person you used to be. They make fun of your goals. They don't take your changes seriously. They remind you of every version of yourself you've been trying to leave behind. And this creates a difficult choice. Do you stay comfortable so everyone else feels familiar? Or do you keep growing, even if it means walking without them? Psychologically, our environment reinforces our behavior. Sometimes the people around us don't even realize they're reinforcing an old version of us. And that's why changing your environment can sometimes feel like losing your identity before you realize you're actually building a new one.
6. You stop interpreting every ending as rejection. This is where something inside you changes. Someone leaves. It hurts, but instead of thinking, nobody stays, you eventually think, maybe this relationship had reached its limit. That's a huge difference. You're no longer turning every ending into evidence that you're unworthy. You understand that people can leave for hundreds of reasons: timing, values, circumstances, growth. Sometimes two good people simply stop fitting into the same chapter, and accepting that protects you from carrying unnecessary blame. 7. You learn to walk alone without becoming closed off. This is where people often misunderstand. Walking alone doesn't mean believing you need nobody. It doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean building walls around yourself. It means becoming comfortable enough with yourself that you don't accept the wrong people just to avoid an empty space. There's a huge difference between "I don't need anyone" and "I don't need to lose myself to keep someone." The second one is strength, because once you're comfortable walking alone, your relationships change. You stop chasing, you stop begging, you stop shrinking, you stop thinking, "What if nobody else comes along?" and start thinking, "If they leave, I'll still be okay." That's when you become selective instead of desperate. And eventually, the right people feel different. They don't ask you to become smaller so they can stay comfortable. They don't punish you for growing. They don't make you choose between your peace and their presence. They simply walk beside you. So, if you're currently in a season where it feels like everyone is leaving, don't immediately assume you're being abandoned. Maybe you're being redirected. Maybe you're learning who you are without constantly adjusting yourself for other people. Maybe this season isn't asking you to find more people. Maybe it's asking you to find yourself. Because sometimes you have to walk alone for a while to discover that you were never actually lost. And when the right people eventually come into your life, you won't need them to complete your journey. You'll simply be grateful that they decided to walk beside you.